You're more than welcome to tonight's webinar as part of the Waterford Kilkenny region webinar autumn series. The title of tonight's webinar is on EBI and the recent changes to EBI in the last couple of months. My name is John Maguire. I'm a dairy advisor in the Mullavat office covering the East Waterford area. And I'm joined here tonight by Nigel Kennington, who is a dairy advisor based in the Kilkenny office, covering the kind of west and the north area of the county. So we're just here kind of to briefly discuss some of the changes that's happened to EBI in the last month or two, how they affect your herd and what kind of new targets are from that side of things. So let's just move on to the next one there, Nigel. We don't plan on keeping you too long here this evening. It'll probably be about 30 minutes or so. Just myself and Nigel will go through some slides, and really the main topics we're here to discuss is the base population change, which is really the main part of the change and what's driving most of the data and the figures change. Also, there's some updates to economic values, which happens every so often and just has to be done to keep things up to date. But also look at the heifer rearing, because that's just been moved around or jigged around in the index, which just slightly affects some of the figures. Then we want to look just how these actually impact on your herd, like what it means for your figures. If you see that your herd has changed, you can kind of compare it to what you should expect, and also some new bull selection targets. So there are some of the main things. Myself and Nigel are going to kind of alternate between the different topics to discuss them. There should be at least a Q&A section on the end of the tab. If any of you have any questions as we're going along or explaining any of the slides, just drop the question into the Q&A tab, and we'll get to the questions at the end. We'll try and answer them as best as we can. Look, we're not experts ourselves. It's recent new changes, so we're still getting to grips with it, but hopefully we'll be able to take a good attempt at answering the question anyway. So Nigel is going to take the first topic, which is the base population change, and I'll hand it over to Nigel now to make a start.
Yeah, so thanks very much, John, and you're very welcome, everyone, to tonight's webinar. So I suppose, as John has outlined there, there has been a change to what we call the base population or the base cow in terms of the EBI. So I suppose just to start with, what is the base population and what are we talking about here? So the base cow or the base population is a group of animals that we know an awful lot of information about. We have an awful lot of data about them. So they're milk recorded animals. They're proven for fertility. We have a lot of fertility data, live weights, health traits, all of that. So in order to gather up all that data, that takes time. But they're well proven animals. So in the past, what we were talking about was animals that were born in 2005. They calved down in 2007, and they were milk recorded in the subsequent years. So that was the original base population or base cow. So if you look at the table below it, I suppose it goes through the details of the figures of the original base cow that we were talking about over the last number of years. So parity there is just another name for lactation or another word for it. And you'll see that there's this tab called weighting here. So that's basically the emphasis that each year of lactation has put on the index. Okay, so you'll notice that the first calvers or the first lactation animals have the strongest weighting. The reason for that being that every animal goes through a first lactation, but not every animal, unfortunately, goes through a second lactation or a subsequent third and further on. So that's why the weighting is so strong on heifers. But you see, as to be expected, the production figures from the base population in terms of the first calvers, 5,500 kilos was the figure. And as the animals mature, their production goes up. So the third plus calvers had a milk volume or kilos of 6,500. Okay, so you'll see there, you know, the protein and the fat percent. The average for the total of all animals in that base population was 3.43% protein and 3.91% fat, delivering, you know, between 440 and 445 kilos of milk solids off 6,000 kilos of milk. Okay, and you have the fertility there. So that's what we used to be talking about in terms of the original base population. So as John has outlined, there's changes on foot in the most recent September evaluations. Okay, so what are those changes? So in terms of overall EBI, in terms of that total EBI figure, the average reduction is going to be €97. Okay, so that's a reduction across the board for all herds and for all animals. The actual figure that your own herd will change will be slightly different, but that's the average drop. Okay, it doesn't mean that those animals' genetics capability has changed, but we're just comparing them to a different base population. So as I say, that base cow or the base population is just the group of animals that we compare every other animal to. So if an animal is negative to the base population, we would expect less genetic potential for that animal. And if they have a bigger figure for a given trait, we'd expect them to outperform the base population, basically. So that €97 of a drop is going to be made up of €45 of a drop in milk subindex and €52 of a drop in fertility subindex. Now, as I say, animals shouldn't re-rank within your herd, so your best cow should still be your best cow, and your worst cow should still be your worst. But just their overall figure will have changed. Okay, so if we were to delve a little bit deeper into it, in terms of that milk subindex, what's the changes on foot there? So in terms of fat kilos, so we're paid on kilos of fat and protein in an A plus B minus C milk pricing system. We're going to see a drop on average in your EBI figure of 7 kilos for fat and 5.5 kilos for protein. In terms of percentages, 0.0% for fat and 0.05% for protein. So that's what you would expect the average herd to drop due to this base change or due to comparing your animals now to a different population. Okay, and in terms of volume, then the average drop will be minus 74 kilos. Okay, and similarly with fertility, calving interval will be increased because we're comparing now to a more fertile population. Okay, so 2.66 days in calving interval and 1.33% in terms of survival. Okay, so we're changing the animals that we're comparing to now. So what are we comparing to? So the new base cow looks like this, or the new base population. Okay, so in the last, we've moved from a 2005 comparison to a 2015 comparison. Okay, so you might say that that's still a long way back, but as I said at the start, we have to have an awful lot of data about that population of animals in order to be fully confident in their performance, and they're fully proven at that stage. So we're comparing to 2015 animals that calved down in 2017 and were milk recorded in the subsequent years to that. Okay, so you'll notice there's a big change, and the big change is, as maybe John will outline, is a lot of it's down to genetic gain that you have implemented. This EBI breeding program over the last number of years has resulted in a lot of genetic gain. So the new base in terms of volume or milk kilos is 6,287, and that's the average of the three lactations with the same weightings that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so it's quite a high volume animal. If you were to put that into a litres context, it's about 6,100 litres of genetic potential per cow. Now, that's if you were working off a kilos figure of zero. Whether your animals actually reach that potential is down to the management on the ground. Okay, but you see the figures are a lot higher in the new base population. So 490 kilos of solids at 4.2 fat and 3.6 protein. So maybe I'll hand it back to you, John, there to go through the gains that have been made in the last few years.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. So just put this slide together, which really just puts the 2005 base cow, which is the old base cow, on the top, and visually compare it versus the 2015 base cow on the bottom, which is the new base cow. So, like, just to kind of reiterate, the base cow is the base that everything is compared against. So anything that if your figures are plus or a high figure, it means that it's more than expected of the base cow. So just to kind of summarize, like, what changed or how has the base cow improved or moved forward over the 10 years from 2005 up to 2015. So we were at 6,044 kilograms of milk per cow, and that's gone up to 6,287 kilograms, which is good. You know, it's positive. There's more milk coming out of the cows. That used to be made up of 236 kilograms of fat and 207 kilograms of protein. That's now gone up to 264 kilograms of fat and 226 kilograms of protein. So some of that is driven through the extra cow yield, And the rest of it then, as you can see on the next one, is driven through those percentages increase. So fat has risen from 390 up to 420, and protein has risen from 343 up to 360. So over the 10 years from 2005 to 2015, that's how the average base cow has risen. So all kind of positive things there, all going in the right direction in that. The other one then is calving interval, so kind of looking at fertility and how is the fertility of the base animal. So on the 2005 base cow, the fertility figure or the calving interval was 398.8 days. So just under 400 days of the calving interval, which was quite long. Now, thankfully, over the 10 years up to 2015, this has been brought back to 385 days. So that's 14 days roughly, or 2 weeks taken off the calving interval, which is a huge success story from that thing. That's why the fertility figure will come down in your new EBI and so on the milk, because the cows are basically milkier and more fertile. The last thing then is just survivability. It's more or less the same, but just slightly improved on the new cow. So all in all, milk yield is up in the 10 years, fat percentage and protein percentage are up, which has driven overall solids. So the overall solids of the base cow from 2005 was 443 kilograms of solids per cow, and that's now risen up to 490. So fairly big increase there. So all the things going in the right direction. And if you move on to the next slide, then, so that's the base cow. So we're comparing it to a better animal, I suppose, for want of a better word. The second thing then, which has changed on the updates, is the economic value. So every so often, the economic values have to be updated just to keep in line with the current trend and to be more accurate. So the first thing that was updated was the milk price. And I suppose it's important to remember here that when the economic values are updated every so often, it's not updated too often, and when it is updated, it kind of needs to be kind of a long-term trend. So usually what happens is if people sit down to update these values, they look back at the previous maybe 4 or 5 years and come up with an average price that's there. And the idea is not to predict the future, but it's more so to get a more solid figure on where things are, where they have been, and where they're sitting right now. So when you look back at the last kind of few years, the average milk price that it was updated to is 40 cents per litre. Now that's including VAT. It's not including any bonuses such as quality or sustainability, etc., or any of those things. It's just a base including the VAT. So that's brought up to 40 cents a litre to better reflect the rise in milk price over the last number of years. The protein to fat ratio is unchanged, so it's still 1.7 to 1 on the value. And also, there's been no change to the A plus B minus C formula. So the C or the processing cost still stays the same. And obviously the value of the fat and protein has increased slightly in line with the milk price. So really the main thing is the milk price is up and it's at 40 cents a litre. The second one then is just general input prices that have changed over the last number of years, and it was said they needed to be updated to be more accurate. The first one is just general feed. So any feed imported in used to be calculated or costed at 250 euros a tonne. That's been increased to 370 euros a tonne. So some people might think, well, I might be buying feed cheaper or dearer than that. But again, it's just looking at the kind of last 4 or 5 year average and coming up with that average for that. So 250 up to 370 on the feed. The fertilizer used to be at 420 a tonne, and now that's been brought up to 550 a tonne. So kind of more in line there. The energy is probably the biggest rise when you look at it on a percentage basis. So the old figures used to go off a 15 cents per kilowatt hour charge for energy, and that has risen to 25 cents per kilowatt hour. So that's a huge rise, which I'm sure none of you here need to be told. I think that's roughly a 66% rise in cost, which is huge. The last one then is labour, more of a modest increase, around 14 or 15%. So it's gone from 15 euros an hour up to 17 euros an hour. So a small increase there. The last economic value that's been updated then is the cull cow weight in the EBI. That's been updated to a figure of €4.67 per kilogram of carcass. Now again, some of you might be thinking at this time at the moment that you're getting a lot more than that, but that figure has been got from the average of the last 4 or 5 years. In the last 12 months, it's been much more, but in the previous 4 years, it was much less. So when you average it out, that's what it's at, 467. The last thing then is the heifer growth cost. So it obviously costs money to grow and keep a heifer and bring her through for a replacement. Now those figures used to be costed in the beef subindex of the EBI, but now that's been moved over to the maintenance subindex, which just slightly affects the figures on each one. It was just felt that it would be better, more accurate to have it in there because the bigger the cow, the more cost to maintain it, and also you're going to have a bigger heifer, which means she's going to have a higher cost as well. So they're the three main changes. So the milk price has gone up on the values, and the general input prices have increased on those three or four things that we've seen, and the beef then has changed slightly as well. Well, we're on that then, I suppose, on the topic of maintenance, Nigel, I'll hand it back to you and just some other little slight changes on the maintenance and that on the figures so you can talk it through there and see what the differences are.
Yeah, okay. So John has outlined that there has been a change to maintenance, and maybe not all of you are that familiar with what the actual maintenance subindex in the EBI means. So just to give you a quick brief outline, the maintenance subindex within that's built into the EBI, what it aims to achieve is to put a cost on the energy requirement that it takes just to keep the animal alive or keep the cow alive. So an animal just to walk around, keep itself alive, keep itself warm, and move about and do its business has an energy requirement to do that before they ever start producing milk or meat or anything like that. So the EBI tries to account for that, and the bigger the animal, the more the energy will be required just for purely for maintenance alone before production. So what the EBI does is it actually rewards a smaller live weight animal because of that lower energy requirement to maintain them, and it penalizes a larger framed animal with a higher body weight because it takes more energy to keep them alive, right? So where you lose maybe potentially on a maintenance of index, the beef value, as John has outlined as well, has increased. So there could be a slight increase in the beef value for the cull cow weight for some of those larger frame animals, which slightly offsets. But looking at the maintenance alone, right? So we're forgetting the old figures. These were kind of the old Euro figures that we were looking at, and now we're looking at this new maintenance of index from September 2025. So just to give you an idea, in the new figures, €0 of a maintenance equates to a 600 kilo live weight cow. Okay. So that's your average cow in the herd. So your third calver, mid-season where there's no extra weight from a calf inside or anything like that. So that's what the average would be for your third calvers if you have a 0 for maintenance. Okay. So as I said, then if you have a negative figure for maintenance, it's due to there being a bigger live weight animal, as you see down here. And if you have a lighter framed animal, you're awarded on the EBI figure, showing a higher Euro figure there on the EBI. Okay, so there's a new equation to work out based off your maintenance of index what your predicted live weight would be. It's there at the bottom if any of you want to take a photo. It's quite complicated. We'll show you a quick online tool that'll do it a lot easier for you later on in a few minutes. So, okay, so John has teed it up nicely in terms of the changes, right? So he's outlined there the extra feed costs. So feed costs have increased by about 40%. Okay, so just without dwelling on the actual Euro figure here, we'll just look at the trends. Okay, so if you look at the cost to maintain a cow in the old system, that was 0.74, right? Because of that 40% increase, that figure now sits at 106. Okay, so it's costing more to maintain every animal because feed costs are higher. Okay, the other addition is the extra addition of the heifer into the maintenance subindex. So previously that was all accounted for inside in the beef subindex. That's now been moved out. Okay, and to be fair, for the vast majority of systems out there, the energy cost to produce that heifer falls on the same farm. So we have to account for that too in the economics of the whole thing, right? So there's 37% of the total maintenance allocated now to the heifer, whereas was 100% of the cost to the cow. Okay, 37% may seem high to you. The reason it's that figure is so it takes 2 years to rear a heifer to the stage where they get to the parlor. but all the EBI is based off an annual figure. So they have to pay, the EBI accounts for it on 1 year. We also have to account for losses in terms of not every heifer makes it to the parlour. Some will unfortunately be lost out of the system. Some won't go on calf. Okay. So there is losses along the way. So that's why the percentage is higher than the 20% replacement rate that you might think of in your own head. It's not an equivalent figure. Okay. So when you add in the cost to the heifer and the extra cost due to the feed, okay, we've gone from 0.74 to 1.69 in terms of that economic weight. So that means that there's an awful lot bigger swings, I suppose, or a bigger range in terms of the maintenance subindex now. So if we were just to take two examples of cows, right? So you have a 550 kilo cow and a 650 kilo cow. So in the previous, if you were to give them a previous figure, €17 for maintenance for the 550, -8 for the 650, that was a previous difference of €24. Okay, we look at those same cows today with the new costings, the more up-to-date figures, we're looking at €24 for that 550 kilo cow, -13 for the 650 kilo cow. So that's a difference of 36. So that's because of the extra feed costs. Okay. Now we add in also the heifer contribution, so there'll be a similar trend. The smaller animal having a positive figure, the heavier animal having a negative figure. So that's actually adding 22 to the 36, which is giving us 57, okay, of a difference between 29 and 28. So this figure now is a combination of the cow and the heifer, and you'll see the swing is a lot different. So there's 57 of a difference between the two, whereas previously it was only 24. So the range has just got wider, okay? Even though the ranking will be the same. So there's still the same animals will be rewarded or penalized, but just the spread has got bigger on them, okay? So there's a nice little tool there. A lot of that mightn't mean a whole lot to you. All you want to know maybe is what do these figures on the ground mean to my herd, okay? So we're just going to show you, I suppose, a quick demo of how to go about finding a quick tool to work out those figures for you handily. Okay, so if you just go into Google and type in ICBF EBI maintenance converter. Okay, so you punch that into any search engine. It doesn't have to be Google. You punch it in there. The first one that comes up there is the EBI maintenance subindex. What has changed from ICBF? So if we click on that, it brings us to an article that explains a lot of the things that we've talked about here tonight. And as I say, ICBF has provided a lot of the tables and data for the presentation tonight. So just to acknowledge the work that they're doing on this as well. Okay, so if I just go back there to that article, I scroll down to the bottom, and there's this green button here that says maintenance subindex ready reckoner. So if I click on that, I don't have to be logged into ICBF or anything. It's available for everyone online. So
can anyone go into that, Nigel, and use that? They can.
Yeah, you don't have to be on Herd Plus. You don't have to be signed up or anything. It's free. It's there available to everyone. Okay, so there's three different sets of way you can twist the figure. So you could say, okay, what was my old maintenance figure? What's my new one? So if my old maintenance figure was, we'll just say 13, my new maintenance figure would be 21, and that would equate in the new figures to 564 kilo predicted third calver, as we say, average of the herd. Okay, if we were to flip that on its head and say, okay, I'm going to aim to have a 500 and we just say 20 kilo live weight animal. That's the target cow that I'd like to have. Okay, if that's your target, your maintenance figure that you're aiming for is €47. Okay, so if I'm picking bulls or picking cows to be the future, the herd to breed off of, I'm going to be in the range of plus or minus a bit around the 47 if that's the type of cow that I want to breed. Okay. And then similarly, if I just wanted to say, okay, I'm looking at my new EBI report, I don't really know what the maintenance means on that. If I have a figure of €10 there, what does that mean? It means I have a mature cow predicted to be 585 or 84 kilos. Okay. So just very quickly, that's a simple tool without getting into too much maths on it, that we can get a fair idea of, the cow size is going to be an individual decision for your farm and where you want it to sit. But that tool there will help you to breed the cow that you want to have for the future, I suppose. So Google ICBF EBI maintenance converter, go into the article, scroll to the bottom, click on the green button and it'll bring you to here to find out. So we'll just go back to the presentation there then. And just see. So I'll pass it back to you, John, maybe to look at what we're looking for now in terms of new targets.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. So myself and Nigel sat down last week, kind of in preparation for this webinar, and we kind of said, what we're going to discuss or what we're going to talk about. And obviously the changes to the figures were important and to describe them, but we also just kind of said, what would be worthwhile for a farmer maybe coming on to this webinar, what would they like to know, I suppose. So we just thought that for a lot of you going away here, you probably used to have an idea or a target figures in your head for picking bulls on the old system. You had a fair idea what was good and what was bad and what you were looking for your own cows. So I suppose we just wanted to give a rough indication of what kind of those targets have changed to, because the straw selection gets earlier and earlier every year now. People are thinking about it much earlier than they used to. So we sat down and we put together an old target that a lot of our clients would use when selecting bulls, and then we ran the change to the figures and saw what those new targets were. So of the top 6 or 7 things that people looked for, this is what came up. So on the old system, the milk kilograms, we were looking for a range between -200 and +200. So nothing too extreme, kind of either side of zero really on that. And if you're looking for that in the new system, you're going to be looking for a range of -250 to +100. So give or take, we kept the figures fairly round because we thought they'd be easier to remember. But what that means to summarize is that there will be more bulls that you'll be picking that are more negative on milk than they used to be. And the reason for that is because the base cow, the 2015 base cow is just more milky and has more milk. So it has to move back a bit on that side. So -250 to +100. For a lot of clients, they would have said to us that they want to pick bulls that have a fat PTA of above 0.27. And what that means in the new figures is a PTA of above 0.2. So that's the change on that. A lot of people told us that they wanted protein PTAs above 0.2. And what that now correlates to on the new figures is PTA for protein above 0.15. So when you combine that, the milk kilograms and the fat and protein percentages, what a lot of farmers used to think was that they wanted to have the bull team with over 30 kilograms of solids. That was a target a lot of people had in their head. On the new figures, that target is now over 17 kilograms of solids. The maintenance then, I just chose €14 because €14 was the national average for maintenance. So if you were a national average and you're €14 for maintenance, on the new figures, you're now 22. So about 7 or 8 increase there. Last two then is the milk and fertility subindex. So a lot of people would tell us that they want their milk subindex to be as close as they can to 100 kilograms for the bull team and fertility at 120, 125. And what that now correlates to is €55 on the milk subindex and €68 on the fertility subindex. A handy rule of thumb is that on average, you kind of want the fertility subindex to be 1.2 or 1.25 times the milk. The reason for that is just so that the breeding is there, that it has the fertility to maintain that level of milk output, especially given most farms are in a tight spring calving system. So we just thought that would be useful to go through some of the old targets that a lot of people would have said they were using and just compare them on the new targets. And we thought that'd be worthwhile. So on the next one then, just to discuss how the average herd has changed then overall in EBI, given all of these changes that we just spoke about. So there's somewhere between 1.3 and 1.4 million dairy cows in the country with an EBI. Those average cows used to have an EBI of €194, and that's now dropped to around €111. So for your own herd, if you're looking at your figures at home, you should expect that your EBI will drop somewhere in the region of €80 overall. That's what you'd expect given the updated figures. So the old average then used to be a milk subindex of 57 and a fertility of 86. And that has now changed to 19 for the milk and 41 for the fertility. So milk has dropped around 38 on the average cow and around 45 on the fertility. So that's what you'd expect. Carbon then on the old average cows used to be €7 and it's now gone up to €8. So a slight increase of €1 you'd expect to see in your own herd. The calving then used to be €32 and that's gone down to 17. So a €16 drop there. The reason for that is because in general, gestations are getting shorter with our animals. Calving difficulty has gotten easier and overall survivability has improved. So that's why that drop is there. On the old average cow then, she was -11 for beef and that's now increased up to -€6. So it's a €5 increase. And the reason for that is because of what Nigel said earlier. The heifer growth cost has been moved from the beef subindex to the maintenance subindex. So that's explaining most of that change. As I said earlier then, on the old system, the average maintenance was €14 and that's now €22. So everyone should see an €8 or €9 change in their maintenance. Again, some will be more and some will be less, but on average, that's what it is. The last two then is management and health. So management on average used to be €1 and has now gone to -1, so €2 drop. And health used to be €7 and it's now gone up to €10, so a €3 increase. So most herds now should really be looking at double figures or close enough to it on the health side. So I just thought that'd be worthwhile to put it in to see that how the average of the 1.3 or 1.4 million cows in the country with an EBI, how the changes have actually changed their figures on the ground. So it'd just be a good table for you to compare yourself to that. If you're wondering, oh, my carbon changed this amount and my milk changed that amount, is that normal or is it more than the average? So that's an interesting table just to compare to there. So I'll hand it over to you then, Nigel. I think this is our last slide or two, just to summarize, and we'll take any questions then at the end. If anyone has any questions, just remind you, put them into the Q&A and we'll try and get to them there at the end.
Yeah, so I suppose a lot of people now with the base changes, as I said, the new cows that we're comparing every other cow to, the new base population has quite a lot of volume behind them. Okay, so you're going to be seeing a lot of herds now with a negative figure for kilos of milk or volume of milk. Okay, so is that necessarily a bad thing, or what is that translating to on the ground in terms of milk value? Okay, so we've just three different cows here, individual cows that have milk recorded data. Okay, just as an example to give. Okay, so the first cow here on the list is -51 for kilos of milk. Okay, so volume, -51 for volume. The next cow is 93, and the last cow has quite a strong genetic potential for volume at 397. Okay, so what's that translating to on the ground? So the highest milk kilos cow is providing the highest liters at 7,000. Similarly, then the lower one is 6,000, and the negative one here is at 5,000 liters. Okay, so the volume, as I say, in the EBI or the milk kilos figure is a good predictor of the liters that cow has the potential to produce. Okay, so but if you look at the milk subindex tab, okay, the cow with the highest liters has the lowest milk subindex or the lowest euro figures for milk, and the lowest volume cow has the highest milk subindex. Okay, so you might say, what's going on there? Okay, the reason that is because these particular cows, okay, just because she has low volume doesn't mean she has high percentages, but in this scenario she does. Okay, so the 5,000 liter cow here has very strong fat and protein percent, and the highest volume one here would be poor on both fat and protein percent. Okay, so when it gets into the actual terms in terms of kilos of milk solids produced for those three cows, and again you're paid on kilos of milk solids in A plus B minus C, which you're all on, even though you get a cent per liter price on your milk statement, you're still paid on kilos of fat and protein. Okay, so you'll see here they're all very similar, with the lowest volume cow being slightly under the 500 and the other two being on 500. Okay, so the same kilos of milk solids are produced from various different liters. Okay, if we were to put the milk value on those, that actual milk produced, okay, so A being your kilos of fat, that's the value on the kilo of fat from the three cows, B being the value of the kilos of protein, and minus C being the volume adjustment, so the negative cost that the co-ops put on you for processing water. Okay, so when you actually take that all into account, the highest milk value is generated by the lowest volume cow, okay, off similar solids. And it's due to the kilos of, or the percentages of protein with a lower volume charge, okay? So the EBI, okay, is a good predictor. If you look at that milk kilos, that's a good predictor of milk volume, but it's a poor predictor of milk value, okay? The best predictor for milk value is the milk subindex, okay? So if you were to look at nothing else alone, if you wanted to keep it very simple, if you breed for milk subindex, you're breeding for milk value. Okay, if that's one take home from today. Okay, so just because you don't see a negative figure for your own herd for milk kilos, don't get a fright and think you have to try change that around. It's all about the kilos of solids delivered, the milk subindex translating into the higher milk values. Okay, that's what we want to breed for going forward. Okay, so just to make that point. So just to wrap it up then, and as I say, we'll take questions then through the chat, or if anyone wants to shout, we'll take them as well, right? So we've an updated base cow, as we've mentioned. So we're comparing all your animals now to a different baseline, to a more improved, genetically superior cow, a more modern cow, and that's why all the EBIs have dropped for every herd, okay? Because we're comparing them now to better animals, okay? There's new economic figures. A lot of research goes into the back of these models. A lot of it is Teagasc data that's fed into the EBI system through ICBF. And those new economic figures are making the EBI more up to date with the current scenario on the ground in terms of input prices, okay, and output prices. So there's a change to the maintenance subindex. So the maintenance as we knew it before has changed. We've the heifer now included in there. So we just have to recalibrate ourselves in terms of what those euro figures now mean in terms of the live weight of our animals. And as John outlined now, we're going to have slightly different targets. If we set out with the same targets as we previously had, there'd be very few, if any, bulls that would meet those targets now because we're comparing them to a superior set of animals. Okay, so we've an adjustment in our calibration in the figures that we're looking for. Okay, but with all that, I suppose the key principles, I suppose, really haven't changed at all. Okay, the EBI is still delivering massively on the ground. You see the genetic gain that's been made in the last 10 years. So we just have to really keep the emphasis on breeding the best to the best. Breeding for high fertility and milk subindex animals, and that is delivering on the ground for farmers all around the country. So none of that has changed, but just the figures that we're looking at have changed. So at this stage, then we'll thank you for your time and open it up to any questions. Or Mark might have a few questions there, either through the chat.
Yeah, I just see I can see one question on the Q&A, Nigel. I might just jump to it straight away. The question is, in relation to the bull targets, are the figures correlated as you change targets? As in, we have 30 kilograms of milk solid is now a 17 kilogram milk solid target. And I think the question here is that if your old target was 35 kilograms, would your new target be 22? And is that the same correlation? So, yeah, the answer to that is yes. So the reason why the targets have changed is because you're comparing to a different animal, a better animal. So Nigel is just going through there, I suppose, where those things were got from. Nigel, if you want to explain it.
Yeah, so you're 100% right. So if your original aim was for 35 kilos between fat and protein, you add the two of these together, you're looking at 12 and a half of a drop. So you're in that 22, 23 bracket in terms of what you're aiming for now to be the same equivalent figure. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's roughly 12 and a half kilograms. So exactly, if you were targeting 35, you're now targeting 22 or thereabouts. So it's the same all the way along the line.
Anything else there, John?
Yeah, there's a few other questions in there, but keep them coming there. Firstly, why bother with the changes at all, and why not just leave things the way they were?
Yeah, I suppose it's a fair comment, Mark, but I suppose really what we're looking at is, we're comparing to the 2005 animals was probably a little bit outdated. I suppose the new costings had to be updated as well to reflect the current scenario. And I suppose the EBI changes over time and it has to change to keep in line with what's happening on the ground as well. So we've better cows now on the ground. So why should we be comparing to an inferior animal? And as I say, the animals you've bred haven't changed. It's just how we look at them is slightly different now. Yeah.
There's another one there. If the cow has 0 for milk kgs, what should she milk on the ground?
Yeah, so if in the new base cow is has a milk kilos of 6,287, right? So that's what you would expect from a 0 kgs milk PTA, right? Will that actually happen on the ground? That's due to a number of different other factors. So the management of that animal is going to have a big impact on this. So genetics plays a massive part, but the other part of it is the environment that they're exposed to. So certain animals will outperform that base if they're managed really, really well, and there'll be other animals that won't achieve that, even though they have the genetic potential. If the management of that animal isn't right, they won't reach their genetic potential for that. So I'd say that the short answer is 6,287 kilos of milk, which equates to 6,100 liters. But the actual on the ground performance will depend on the management of those animals. And I suppose it's just another point to make, I suppose, with the current banding, a lot of people will be trying to stay within a middle category, a middle band to stay at 92 kilos per cow from a stocking rate perspective. And that's just a really important point to note. If you're in that category and you're trying to stay there, you don't want to be breeding from animals, from bulls or selecting bulls that are very positive for milk kilos. Somewhere around the 0 should keep you in that middle category.
Yeah, that's a good point, Nigel, as well, because like if, when I'm looking at different herds and that, I'd probably say that that's the biggest variation in terms of I've seen herds with very high PTAs for milk kilograms and they're not high milk yield on the ground. And I've seen herds with low PTAs for milk kilograms and they have quite good milk kilograms sold on the ground. And I suppose a lot of that comes down to management, and especially given the fact that most herds in Ireland are spring calving, fertility is really the main driver of milk production. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say if you happen her going back and calf every year, she's not going to get if you're drying off, she's not going to get the days in milk if she calves late in the season and that as well. But like a 0 figure for milk for third calvers plus, they can deliver over 7,000 kilos of milk. Like it's a high
Yeah,
production cow now. So if you're trying to stay under the 6,500 kilos for the middle band, as I say, it'd be very easy to tip you over the edge there if you started breeding positive.
it is.
Um,
And if you look at the national average lactation in the country, on average, the average cow is 3.7 lactations. So but they're only just about getting going in terms of milk yield and maturity, and then they're falling out of the system on average. So really, in a spring calving system to drive milk volume, you really should be looking at days of milk and fertility and calving on time.
Yeah, yeah. And now I suppose the only other thing, that's a 305-day milk performance, which again, due to fertility, maybe a lot of cows don't reach that level of days in milk as well. So just to make that point too, yeah.
Any other questions there, Mark?
Okay, there's just one final one there. Just I suppose in general, where can I find out more information on these changes and on EBI in general?
Yeah, so I suppose anyone for themselves, everyone will have a new EBI report for themselves, I suppose. So it's just to go into ICBF maybe and check your own figures for your own EBI and see where you're at yourself. I suppose that's where you'll find out your own data. Everyone got a letter in the post from ICBF there in the recent weeks as well, which goes through a lot of the things that we've covered on tonight's webinar as well. And other than that, absolutely, to contact your local advisory office if you have any other further questions. The webinar from tonight will be recorded for anyone who wants to watch it back. It'll go up on the Teagasc Kilkenny Waterford YouTube channel. And as I say, if you have any further questions, feel free to contact one of the offices.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, that's all we have from the question point of view there, lads. Yeah.
Perfect. Look, that's all we kind of plan on covering tonight, everyone. We're more or less on time. look, we hope that there was a benefit for you there. We just wanted to put some questions to bed because some people were a bit confused on what the figures meant and what the changes were about. And hopefully there we kind of outlined it as to why they happened, how they happened, and what it means for your figures. And as Nigel said, if you have any other queries of that, either look up the ICBF website to get some more information or chat to your own advisor on that. So just to thank Nigel for coming on here tonight and helping me. He prepared all the slides, and Mark in the background there. It wouldn't be possible without Mark. He's keeping the thing going there and the connectivity, and wouldn't be possible without it. So thanks very much to you on that side, Mark.